Hey, everybody, it's Craig Fitzgerald and my co-host, George Kennedy. This is the NEMPA DriveStream, and our guest today, I'm really excited. It's one of my favorite people. It's Natalie Harrington I'm going to
Hi,
get
thanks
this out. It's lead staff writer from Car Gurus, which is the thing that I have more trouble saying than any other production, any other publication that I know of. So and Car Gurus is right here. It is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I see your awesome sign up on whatever building it is on the Mass Pike now on the way into Boston. So you guys are doing great.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. And yes, we are based in Cambridge for now, but next week we will officially make the move across the river to Boston, which personally I'm really looking forward to because my commute will be easier. So that'll be great.
Yeah. So what is that? What is that building actually? Now that I think about it, does it have a name, that building?
We refer to it as 1001 Boylston.
Oh, nice.
It may have an official name. So It's not our building, but we are the anchor tenants. We have the top 10 floors, and it's really exciting. It's been in the works for quite a while. I think it's going to be really neat to be in the heart of Boston. It's going to be a great employee experience and good for, brand recognition too.
Yeah. And you guys have, like, you're hitting home runs here, like the site's great, like the content's really great. And I've watched it grow from this really small company, really small group of people to something that's, much more significant, much in the way that Travelocity grew too. We kind of saw that too. So those companies were linked for a time there. And so tell me a little bit about what's been going on there.
So there has been a lot of growth, as you observed, yes, which is exciting. I know a lot of companies had to kind of step back a bit in the pandemic, but I think Car Gurus has taken a really smart approach and didn't overextend. And so now we are in a ramp up place, which is great. I'm on the marketing team. So I'm on the editorial content team and we sit under marketing. We recently combined with B2B. So we've got consumer marketing and B2B together, which is great because I get a lot more insight into, our dealer clients as well. But for me, my role is focused on consumer advice, editorial content, and we work closely with our SEO team. So that's been a new-ish initiative. We're ramping up again over the past year or so. Really educational experience for me, really informative. And I'm glad to hear that it looks like it's working.
Yeah, it's great. I see my stuff on there, first of all. So I'm always excited to see my name.
Yeah, my stuff too. This is the funny thing. So Natalie is one of the people that I submit to for freelance work for Car Gurus. And then we have an outlet, a much smaller outlet called Upshift, which is the official publication of the Lars Anderson Auto Museum, for which Natalie is a board member. And so I'm the editor of that, and she's a contributor there. So like, she's submitting stuff to me, I'm submitting stuff to her, but that's sort of the nature of sort of how things work for the New England Motor Press Association, where it's like you get people gigs where you can, when you can, and it's all this sort of interwoven ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so glad to hear that too. That has always been the promise of the New England Motor Press Association. It was that, we're all working together. We're trying to promote people. We're trying to, because it was so hard here, in the early years of this group. If you weren't in Detroit or LA or New York, nobody paid any attention to you. And, it was John White at the Boston Globe and a couple other people. But John White's kind of thought was everybody should deserve a shot at this. So it's got to be, it had to be gratifying for John at the end of his life to see, how much this group grew and how it took that really to heart. So, Natalie, how did you get started? Like, I love hearing everybody's story about how they get started doing this, because nobody went to college to do this,
Yeah, nobody I know here anyway. Yeah, so similar experience. I've always been a car person. My dad's a car person, so I think that's probably where I got it. Although we've got it on my mom's side too. Her grandfather was a mechanic. So I started volunteering for the Lars Anderson Auto Museum in maybe 2011. I visited for one lawn event, fell in love, and basically said, how can I come back here as much as possible, and will you let me participate, basically. And as we've said, that eventually evolved into a board position, which I'm very gratified by and excited about. But through my work with Lars Anderson Auto Museum, I started contributing to Upshift, which George mentioned. George is our founding editor, so not taking quite enough credit for getting that going and keeping it going. It definitely wouldn't be in the shape it is in without him. And so I was excited to get to contribute to that. That was really my first gig writing about cars. And through that, I started to feel, okay, I could do this. Cars were always a passion. I was in a job that was great in many ways, but never going to magically morph into a dream job. And I'm very fortunate that my parents are both, or have been at times, freelance. My dad's an artist, my mom's a writer. So they actually kind of talked me into it and said, you don't have to stay here. Like, we raised 2 kids and sent them to college freelancing. You could manage and it would be okay. So I quit without a backup plan, really. Freelanced for a couple of years, taking whatever work I could get. Meanwhile, got to join NEMPA through my connection with Upshift and with George and Sheldon. And that's how I met Matt. And that's how I started freelancing for Car Gurus. And then this full-time position opened up and they said, we'd like you to interview for it. And I said, I don't know, I work for myself. This is great. And then I interviewed and it did sound really interesting. So, and it's been
it's so awesome to have like support like that, because I feel like my parents have been supportive, but I know that, like, I'm sure some families, it's like, no, you need to go be a CPA. Like, if this doesn't work out right away, and then go do this, go do that. Right.
Yeah. I had a solid 2 years of just, whatever writing I could get. So I did a lot of life sciences, a lot of like business vendor case studies, things that weren't really, what I wanted to be doing, but you got to pay rent. And I'm really fortunate that it worked out.
Yeah, it's weird, the stuff that when you're a full-time freelancer, it's like that, that scene from The Simpsons when Rainier Wolfcastle gets, he basically doesn't have a job. He's standing in line. He'll do anything. I play nerd. I do nude scene. Like, I'll do anything. So I wrote this, like, I had to write a white paper for T-Mobile, like, of all things.
Wow.
Like, okay, I'll take it. The money was good, So I'm glad to hear that you went from, what was your full-time job? Like, you don't have to tell me where, but like, I'm always interested.
It is kind of interesting. It was interesting. So at the end, I was managing a department at a string instrument shop in Newton, Mass. So
No way.
Violins, violas, cellos. Yep. Yeah. I played violin from the time I was in kindergarten through high school, basically.
Oh, now these are the things that I want to know about people. This is why we have these conversations, because I think you're probably the only violinist in the New England Motor Press Association.
Could be, but not the only musician, because we've got you, we've got Rich Tabor.
Correct. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of half talented musicians out there, like myself.
That's collecting a lot of dust right now. So
right. Yeah, I know. There's guitars hanging in everybody's room.
They're paperweights right now, at least for the last month it's been. So
that's really interesting. So it's funny. Like, the reason I asked that is because I worked for somebody not that long ago who was a lace salesperson when she started. Like, her job out of college is like, you just kind of take anything and figure out what you want to do. And then that, where this is not such a, this isn't like, becoming a surveyor or something. There's no path to this. It's passion that kind of,
or like, look out something so defined as like pre-law or becoming a nurse or something like that. Right. And so it's funny. I, have parents like, friends of my parents, Marina, who were like, oh, my son would love to become an auto writer. I was like, A, just so you know, this is, you're not going to be able to afford a Ferrari doing this, but B, to what you guys were saying about flexibility and being a hand raiser, like, the first thing you got to learn. And I think that what Natalie and I were figuring out when, like, Natalie was integral in helping start Upshift, in that, like, I needed a second set of eyes on like editorial stuff and like more than just a contributor, like all that copy editing, super helpful. we kind of had a little bit of a revolving door of like younger writers at first. There were a couple personalities, and like getting them to understand like one, when you submit an article, it kind of is no longer your possession anymore. It belongs to the editor. And, you know, you might have some very strong feelings, but really, especially for something like Upshift, where the whole point of the outlet, like we want to write what we want to write about, but the whole point is to try and grow awareness for the museum. There are designs and there are motivations that go well beyond like this individual article. So understanding that, like, look, we might have you doing a bunch of other things to fit into this narrative. And also we might have to kind of take a hatchet to your article. Don't take it personally, but there are some political things in the background that we need to fulfill for this article to sort of end the way we need it to end.
Right.
Yeah. It's not about, you know, your ego as the writer at the end of the day. It's about the piece accomplishing what it needs to accomplish for the outlet. Yeah.
And at those moments when you do get to write something like that, it's rare. It's sort of like a gift. You're like, oh, I have carte blanche. Like that's where I'm grateful when I will do a piece for Upshift that I'm like, well, I'm also the editor. So if I want to say it this way, I can, but I'm not going to like say something that's absolutely going to sandbag sort of our designs and our goals for the outlet.
And, you know, I'll say I actually, and I know I've talked with you about this, George, I struggle sometimes when I do have carte blanche because I'm not used to it. And I start to be like, where's the framework? Like, what do we want out of this? And then I have to reach out to my editor and say, you know, I'm not sure what to cut, or this just is not coming together. Can you help me? So,
right. But, like,
I need more experience with
that. There are outlets, and like I'd say I have probably like between like 5 and 7 clients, depending what year it is. Right. And like some outlets, it's very top down. Like from US News, I get my assignments every week, and those are informed by the SEO team. The same with Car Gurus. Like that is informed by a lot of SEO work, and the end of that very heavy lifting is I get an assignment. And then there are other outlets that are like, look, we're new, or we're expanding this. Like, what do you think here? And it's a nice format to be creative, but it is kind of rare when you get those moments. And when you're up to your bandwidth capacity, you're very grateful to have that sort of top-down guidance from editorial.
So I've had this experience a lot, and I'm wondering if you have it too, Natalie, where, you know, people learn what you do. They kind of, you know, everybody says, oh, wow, what a cool job. And then probably, you know, 20% of those people will say, how do I get to do what you're doing? Like, is that happening to you at this point?
That does happen to me. Yep. I get that a fair amount.
What is the advice that you're giving to people at this point?
So I have to fall back on what worked for me, and with the caveat that that's not necessarily always right for everyone. But for me, it was saying yes to a lot of things, and honestly, you know, doing some work for free, which I don't think is great business advice, but it is an opportunity to prove yourself, you know, which is important. There are a lot of established voices out there, and why should somebody take a risk on you? Can be a little bit tricky. So that for me, it was saying yes to opportunities, and doing some work for free, which, as you know, because of the museum and my role at the museum, it made perfect sense anyway. So, you know, as a board member,
you're doing as a volunteer effort or whatever. I mean, that's different than, you know, like I think for us, you know, like we're you know, as a group, it's not like it's a union or anything, but we are kind of like, hey, look, you know, we're all doing this for a living, you know what I mean? Right. So like, you don't want to be undercut by somebody who's coming in saying, yeah, I'll do this for nothing. But you know, that's a different kind of a thing where, you know, you're volunteering for an organization, you're on the board, and you're also trying to promote that, you know, that museum. Like, that makes total sense to me. That's a great way to get into it. And actually, it's funny. I was like, you know, I had in my head was like, well, you know, your experience is much different than mine because I started out in print, but you're writing for a print publication, right? I mean, is Shift a print publication or is it online? Is it wholly online?
It's not yet. It has the format and look and feel of a glossy.
Got it.
But to be digested via like tablet is the optimal way to read it.
Got it.
And we did that because we were, you know, this is the benefit of doing something in digital age where this would have been a lot of overhead in the past.
Oh my God.
Right. That would have taken us a lot longer. We would have been under a lot more pressure, I think, we have advertisers, but we would have been under the gun to find more. we're getting to a point now where we have enough of a backlog, and there's been enough of demand from not only readers, but folks collectors who've been featured, who would really love to have that to display like on a coffee table or something. So we're exploring different paths to get a glossy version of that, to get a print version of that. It won't be super wide, but it'll be like a nice little VIP version, right?
Right. So tell me how you made the shift from Shift to Car Gurus. How did that kind of? Oh, I'm sorry. You said you met Matt at one of our events, but like, were you freelancing for him for a while, or?
Yes. Yeah. 5 or 6 months freelancing, production, editing, a bit of writing. So, the other piece of advice, and something that I tried to do, and I think could have done better and other people can do better, is to try to make yourself visible, so I think that was really how this, like, anytime I did get to write something, for example, for Zane and Josh Merva for gmtrucks.com, I got to write a really cool piece on the Future Liner, which I was so excited about, and then so thrilled to be published. And that was actually my first paid automotive writing gig. So
that's great.
A huge deal for me. Yes.
Did you go out to see the one in Springfield or wherever it is at Peter Pan?
No, I still haven't seen one in person. There's one at a museum in Indianapolis as well, I think, and I got to make it out there. But so then, I'm so excited about it, so I'm sharing it widely. Like, everybody needs to see and read this article.
Right.
And same with Upshift, I would share it in my Instagram stories and just try to get eyes on things. So it gives you kind of, not necessarily an official portfolio, but people think of you as, okay, I know you can do this. Like, I've read your work. And you're putting samples out there.
You ride that success for all you can. That's like, I literally 2 months ago, I found the first thing that I ever got paid to write for the Concord Journal. I get paid $25 for it. I might as well have worked for free. And I thought about that, and like those things that, worked for me. And one of those was taking that thing and shipping it to everybody I could at the time, because, websites were a thing, obviously, but not to the degree that they are now. And so I sent that thing to everybody. I got tons of work out of that. So that's exactly what you do,
Yeah.
It's
when you do something unique, like the Future Liner thing, like you want to, I mean, there's so many reviews on cars, right? There's sort of a cadence, right? That when you do something unique, it's worth sharing. And that's like one of the things that I enjoy working with Natalie, is that like there's like enough of work already established. Or like, okay, I can trust this person with doing XYZ, right? So like, I had Natalie go we did something on the Wilbraham Hill Climb. And that's coming out in the future issue, which should be coming out. I mean, by the time this airs, it should be out. And I mean, that's something that I would have not known to go do. And once again, we're also getting guidance from Sheldon Steele, the executive director of the museum, who's sort of dropping dimes on like this, that, and the other thing. So like, okay, this is a really cool event worth checking out. I'm like, that'd be a perfect fit for Natalie to take on. And then there are other items that I'm like, okay, the rest of our staff can focus on, this collector car that's in the museum right now. So like almost that sort of, let's go find that cool feature story, something worth shouting from the rooftops.
One of the things that I've been really impressed with about you is your sort of transition from writing to video. You've been doing video content for Car Gurus too, and it's great. It's like, it's really interesting. It's fun to watch. You had sort of developed this thing on saw it on Instagram, I guess, that was like, it's you and your husband now sort of fitting yourself into these cars front and back to kind of show, how real people actually use these cars. So like, congratulations on that. I love it. And tell me about that transition, because that's something that's been pretty hard for me. I'm not a video person necessarily, but
interesting, because I remember you did you were presenting for the NEMPA YouTube channel, and I thought it was great. So there is some of that. We're always our own harshest critics. But,
for sure.
Yeah, I had a really special opportunity with Car Gurus to get to sort of learn it. So when I started, I would go along with my boss, Matt, on his shoots and kind of see from behind the scenes and serve as script supervisor and say things like, yeah, you basically got the line, but you left out this part. And I think you mentioned it later, so maybe we should do that again. Stuff like that. So I had already gotten that behind the scenes look. And then he suggested that maybe it was something I should think about, but was also very considerate about, I think he said, I, of all people, know that this is not the same thing as writing and that people can be mean on the internet. And so absolutely no pressure if you're not interested, but think about it. And I thought, why not? And now it turns out it's something that I really love doing. It's one of my favorite things. In some ways, I find it easier to talk about the car on camera than to sit down and write a full review. I think some of it's a little bit like, trying to speak a second language where you can rely a little on going, and
sure.
People understand. So it's almost like you don't have to go that final mile to be extremely articulate about what you mean, because people get it when you're gesturing and stuff like that.
Well, especially in, how high tech cars are right now. I found that I can show in a video or like a YouTube clip in like 20 seconds why this screen is bad or why the screen is good. It would take me a page and a half to convey like the minutia of the different menus and stuff, like why it takes an extra, keystroke or whatever to that the same exact thing. So yeah, you show, you don't tell, and that to what you're saying, it kind of it's might be more natural.
True. And then I'll say too, with the thing that you mentioned, those short videos of the legroom, thanks for watching, Craig. And those were part of my efforts to get a little bit more into making short form social video, which I see a ton of people doing. I think it's such a great opportunity, and I just have not pushed quite so far into that as I'd like to. I think it's easy to sort of back burner your own initiatives when you're also trying to excel at a full-time job. But I thought those would be fun. And we do get comments sometimes where I'll say something like, I try to always give the numbers, because if I just say headroom's good, people are like, yeah, but how tall are you anyway? And I'm like, well, not very.
Well, but the great thing is your husband is tall, right? I mean, he's 6 feet tall, right? So you see the both of you, and then all of a sudden and immediately you understand like, oh, okay, these are two people that are in the same car. They've got to kind of coexist in this thing. How is it working out for them? And I don't know, it's just a kind of perfect representation of how, real people have to use a car, which I think is like, that's our thing in New England. Like we, in the New England Motor Press Association, we're trying to really use these cars in the way that we use them, which is different from the way somebody in LA is. So, I don't know. I thought it was a kind of a perfect idea, and I haven't seen anybody really do that. So congrats on that. I really love it.
Thank you. I have a backlog now. I'll publish some more of them.
Good. I'm glad. So do you, when you're doing a video for Car Gurus specifically, do you have a script that you write ahead of time, or are you just kind of taking notes and?
Yeah, so it's evolving. At first I was very, very, like I script it very specifically and then run it by other people, gathering feedback and trying to make sure, am I doing this right? And then you get used to a process, and then you're able to kind of evolve a little into your own direction and put your own spin on it. So now sometimes it's just because I might not have the time. I make sure I have all the facts. The last thing I want to do is get a fact wrong. And I obviously have gotten the seat time in the car. I'm never going to just be like, this was just delivered, let's film it today, because that's not genuine advice for anybody. Nobody needs my take if I've just seen the car for the first time, because they can go to the dealership and do that. But what they can't do, regular consumers, is spend a week with the vehicle like we get to. So I think that's the special part. But now I work more and more off of bullet points, which is something I know Corfatia does too. And I was striving to do that because I think it comes off a little bit more natural and conversational, and less like I memorized this and who knows who.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that's the thing that people don't tell you when you're doing this stuff, is like, you can write a script and you can memorize this block by block, but it's going to sound like that.
Yeah.
And you really
I'm
need
not
to
an
learn.
actress.
Right. And so you need to develop some improv skills, right? Which is what you have done now. And, if you're kind of working from bullet points, you need to think on the fly and be able to get the words to come out in the right order, which is a challenge for everybody. What do you think is the biggest challenge for you now, as you're filming these videos?
For video, biggest challenge, getting my hair to look good every time.
Yeah, of course.
Regardless of weather.
When you're outdoors, you can't just wear a hat.
Yeah. And when I do, sometimes Elliot's like, well, we can't really see your face. Come on,
Yeah.
man. I'm hiding something here.
Right.
You guys film year round, so you kind of have to
Yeah.
work with it. And I know, I was with, YouTube for the Car Gurus like early on, like helping develop some of that stuff. So I showed Matt some of the locations, like the 4-H ground, like that's near my parents' house. So that's I scouted that out. And it's like you do have to kind of work with your surroundings because we're not in like a sound stage. So you kind of you take what you're being given in terms of daylight, in terms of weather. Like you gotta work with that. And if there's too much wind, then you gotta put like the fuzzy mic on, and like there's all these little things that go into it. And it is hard, I think, especially in your position or any of the like the talent's position, talking about the car while all of these other things are going on with like Elliot, who does a great job, with the video team. Like there's so many things that you're not aware of that are going on. So hey, we got to redo that. It's nothing you did wrong. We just had the wrong filter on. We had the wrong ND setting on. Like, and then you just sort of have to operate. So you do have to kind of be like the talent and think on the fly and have those ad lib skills.
Yeah. Elliot never makes any kind of mistakes like that, to be not that you were suggesting he does, but yes, there are things like, oh, your coat's crinkling, or like, a plane goes overhead because we are outside. I have a full box. I buy in bulk those, the hot hands, but like the toe versions. Cause
yeah.
Get out there in the winter and your toes are like going to fall off.
Yeah, for sure. So what's your pace like now? Like how many of these are you doing versus, how many articles a month are you writing? What's that look like for you?
So we've gotten a lot faster at shoots, Elliot and I, and some of it depends on, which cars are available in our local fleet and everything too. So I might one week get a vehicle that we need to film, and then another week get one that we don't. And obviously we're always going to make content on it one way or another. But so there have been months this summer where we filmed every week for several weeks in a row. Right now, Elliot and I have not filmed off of a weekly loan in a little while because I've been traveling a fair amount. So it just hasn't worked out. And so, we've worked with Chris to get things we need written content on instead.
Sure.
To make sure we're maximizing and not taking a vehicle that somebody else could be filming right now.
That's a good question. And so you're traveling, are you going on like long lead, like press events and stuff like that? When you say long lead, you mean like late, like there's a deadline much later? Or no, as in like a press preview event, like, say like the Honda. Right. And if so, are you guys filming on those events, or is that purely for written content?
So that depends on whether the manufacturer will allow us a second seat. So we pretty much always ask, and they don't always have the budget or the space to, make room for a videographer. Sometimes they provide their own videographers, which I see a lot of people out there who are fine and they can perform just as well. That is an area that I still have a lot of room to grow. I would say it's very different working with a different, and a stranger.
Yeah, right.
When they provide their own videographer, are they also like accommodating time for you doing stand-ups, or is it like, hey, we're filming the cars and you're going to get footage later, and then you kind of have to figure out the stand-up stuff on your own? So the cases I'm referring to specifically are stand-ups with their own videographer. So I will kind of plan what I'm going to say, but that is just, I'm used to somebody going 3, 2, and they're instead saying camera speed, and I'm like, do I talk now?
Yeah,
right. If you don't come out of central casting, then you might not be as like folks can be good with the team that they're comfortable with. If you're not like just a career presenter, and then you get sent to somewhere new, and it totally can be jarring. So yeah, that's I can see where the automakers would see that as like we can save money by doing this, but like it's not giving folks necessarily what they might need per se.
Yeah, and again, I do see a lot of journalists out there who are, you know, total pros and can operate fine under any conditions. I still am not quite at a point where I think I'm doing my best video work with someone else, but
Yeah.
I'm also lucky that Car Gurus, you know, understands that and doesn't expect me to. So
Somebody told me that like when you're doing video, you need to be yourself, but like 10% more. you,
yeah.
you need to be more you than you, you
I
know?
feel like with me, it might be 10%
Yeah.
less.
Yeah. Right. So has been a largely male dominated business. How have what is your comfort level at this point going to events? Like, do you feel have you felt welcome? Do you feel yeah. I mean, it seems like there's been a sea change in the way this content is produced over the last decade or so. It's been a lot more inclusive to me, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, agreed. I have never felt like anybody was treating me differently. I think I'm fortunate in just the era that I came into this field
Yeah,
too. I know
yeah,
folks who've been in it longer have had bad experiences, and I'm sure everybody's had bad experiences at different times. But I've been very lucky. Certainly, NEMPA. I've never had anyone be anything other than welcoming. That was interesting because it's such a tight knit group and such a long standing group. And to come in, you know, to the first meeting and say, well, gosh, everybody clearly knows each other. So I guess I'm going to go and just barge in on a conversation. Lucky I knew George. I got to, you know, dress up as an elf for that first Christmas party. So you meet people that way. there's no getting around
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and
And
just so you know, like everybody's had their turn in that costume,
yeah.
so it wasn't just you. Yeah,
Yeah, you can tell. No, I'm kidding.
yeah, right.
But no, so I feel I felt included. I've had experiences as a like just an enthusiast attending certain events where I felt like I needed to prove that I had a right to be there, but nothing
Yeah,
professionally ever. And I think, you know, any insecurities that I might ever have are a me problem and not a
self-generated
source.
more than
Yeah,
all right.
not coming from
We all that's all of us too. You know,
right.
like
We all have our battles.
it's been imposter syndrome for 25 years for me now. It's like I'm
Really?
waiting. Oh God, I'm constantly waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and be like, "You're out of here." You know, like
Wow.
it
That's
just
so,
never. I mean, this group has been, you know, amazing to me. Like everybody's been amazing, but it's always like I never felt like I was one of the cool kids. I was like, I just always felt like that. So it's a kind of a natural thing in this business where you're on your own. You know, you're part
yeah.
of a group, you're working for a company, but you're very much on your own merits. So, you know, you're doing great. And like, I think everybody kind of has those same insecurities about the work that they do. So,
Yeah, you know, I do want to mention too that the museum was really instrumental for me,
oh yeah.
just in getting that sense of belonging. I used to really struggle with imposter syndrome, just in terms of feeling like maybe if I'm not somebody who, and I'm not somebody who memorizes all the stats, and then can
Right.
stand around and be like, well, that one had 15 extra horsepower, and I can tell by that's just
Right.
not how I love cars. And I
Right.
used to feel that maybe that made me not really deserving of being involved. And the museum
Yep.
really helped me see that there are lots of different ways to be an enthusiast and to be passionate about cars. And that's okay. And we don't need 50 million of the same voice either. So
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
it's been great.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, so you mentioned when you were talking with Matt and he said, well, you know, people can be mean on the internet. Have people been mean to you on the internet, or do you not read the comments, or like?
I'd say like quarterly, I go down a rabbit hole and read all the comments, and otherwise I ignore them. And generally by that time, Elliot, our video manager, has if there's anything that's like hate speech, he just takes it off our channel. Otherwise, it's pretty regulating. If somebody says something incorrect, someone else will counter them.
Right.
But no, I think I've been lucky. Sometimes people say things like I remember somebody said, I don't need Miss Polly Pocket to sell me a Subaru. And I was like, but he called me small. So
All right. I'm going to be mean.
you're saying I'm cute.
That's it now. That's
Yeah.
it. Like everybody needs a nickname in this group. That is
no.
it. You should not have told me that.
I do remember from like
Right.
different outlets being instructed,
Terrible
like, hey,
misstep.
if you want to tamp down the rhetoric in your comments, like you as the creator of it, like comment in the thread. And people do tend to police themselves a little bit more knowing that you're present in there too. It's almost like you know, if you get taken hostage, like say your full name out loud, it humanizes you.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
That's good advice, George. I'll remember that.
Just, you know,
when I'm taking
full of random stuff like that, right?
Right. They're trying to get, you know, $72 out of my bank account.
Yeah. But then they're
use
weird.
that
Like
advice.
it's funny. There are things that I feel like that because we're covering new products so often. I like to think I have my thumb on the pulse of like what some of the narratives are, but like, you know, when it comes to Toyota, like I love the new powertrains, but like there's a whole subset of people who are absolutely like incensed that they're downsizing. And it's like, okay, on the one hand, you just complain that the old 4Runner engine, the 4-liter doesn't have any power, but you're also complaining because they went from a 6 to a 4
Right.
that has more power, like 100 pounds-foot more torque, and the new Tacoma. It's like, what do you want, right?
Right.
Yeah, or the Hemi to V6 or inline 6 rather, with, you know, all the new Jeeps and Ram trucks and things. People are mad.
You can't please all the folks, you know, something all the time, right?
Yeah.
I do kind of feel the same thing where like when I worked for Hemmings for a long time, and you know I edited a sports car magazine for them, and man, I would pull that magazine together every month. Is like, you know, the readers of this thing know more than I do. They absolutely do. And I, previous to that, I edited a muscle car magazine for them. And the difference in mail that we got was like from the muscle car people was like, what is wrong with you? I'm canceling my subscription. You wrote about 7, Fords and only 6 GM products. So you hate GM products. And it was like hostile. And then I went to the sports car magazine, and it was the mail every month, and the emails were like, it was like an education process. Like, hey, just wanted to let you know, it was like very polite and very calm. It was just a really interesting feedback loop that you get from a different group of people.
I think one of the issues there is that like we're generalists, like we have to.
Yeah,
I always say like not even in terms of like my own personal preferences for automotive is like I'm brand agnostic because designers change, CEOs change. Like if you go, I'm a Ford guy forever. It goes, you realize what Ford was 20 years ago isn't what it is now. So if you're going to say that, you might as well be a Kia guy because that's how apples to tomatoes it is, right? But what you find is that, you know, while we're generalists, everybody who's like, okay, I've got a 9-to-5 and I've got this little passion outside of work, they're subject matter experts on the one car that they really care about or the one genre of car. So that's where I've kind of had to, like when you talk about imposter syndrome, I take that context into account and I'm like, they're always going to know more than me, but I'm going to know more than them.
Yeah.
It's like a mile deep and a mile wide. Right.
Yeah. And it's also like, we're writers, you know what I mean? Like that's the skill that we bring to the table is like, you guys do this too. You pick up the phone and talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. You write down what they say, and then you build that into this article that you're talking, you know, it's like, that's the skill. It's not that I have some encyclopedic knowledge of, you know, Oldsmobiles from, you know, the early 1970s. I do, but you know.
Yeah. Well, to what Natalie was saying about, memorizing specs. Like I remember like younger in my career, I would know all the different horsepowers of all the different outputs and stuff like that. But, you know, at some point you start filling it up at one end and it comes out the other ear. Right.
Yeah.
And what you realize the through current, and that's so much of what we do when we're evaluating cars in New England, is living with the vehicle and distilling what that vehicle is down. Like there are no bad cars anymore, really, right? So it's like being automotive matchmaker and figuring out, okay, what are your needs? Like, what are your priorities? What's your budget? And then finding the right car for these people based on like how firm do they want the ride? What are you doing with it? Are you going camping? Are you towing a horse trailer? Like figuring out how you live with the car. And that's why when we drive cars, we're not at Willow Springs putting down lap times. We're going to the mall. We're going to the grocery store. We're living with these vehicles because the folks that buy them, by and large, are going to be doing the same thing.
So the way that we kind of wrap this thing up is we always talk about what we happen to be driving this week. So Natalie, give me your 2 cents on what you happen to be in this week.
So this week I have the new Subaru Forester. So I actually did go on the launch program, and I saw you.
You and I were on that together, in fact.
Yeah.
I was in Montana, right? It was.
It was. Yeah,
amazing.
And a nice, long, beautiful drive, which unusual for press programs I go on, did have snow, so that was cool. Yeah. And now I have it here in the end of summer, basically. It's nice to get to spend a week with it. You know, it's quite different, again, from that experience of, okay, I've got a couple hours, I want to get accurate first impressions. And also we were doing a full video review on that program. So, it's a fun one. I think it's quieter than the old Forester, which I appreciate.
And they didn't lose anything that people like about those cars either, right? I mean,
no, it's still got the big sort of glass greenhouse. It's still boxy. It's just updated styling. I think it looks a little less distinctly Subaru to me, but the interior I think still feels really authentic to what you expect from a Forester. And it's neat to also have one with the cloth seats because I didn't get to experience that on the on the launch program. So
which trim level is it? Do you know? Is it the Sport or?
I don't know off the top of my head, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like there are some pretty significant distinctions between the trim levels too. But no matter which one you get the same drivetrain, you get the same transmission, which was always my kind of complaint early on with the early CVTs. But man, that thing is terrific. It really, in the mountains in Montana, it felt amazing.
Yeah,
did it have the larger touchscreen? Or is it like the two smaller screens? Because that's the only area where I'm like, everything else about the Subarus are like super utilitarian. And they have this one giant glossy screen that can, I think, become distracting.
It's the 11.6. Yeah, it's big, and a lot of function in it. But you're right, it dominates that dash. So, George, what are you driving this week?
So I'm driving the Mercedes E450. Speaking of screens, that's just the one thing I'll say is that it's got like they were demoing that whole like glass cockpit at the last few auto shows. Yeah. And it's in this now. So the entire center console, one massive screen. There's a screen for the passenger side dash. And then it's got the fully digital instrument panel. That part was a little distracting, but I think they've listened. So like in a lot of these cars where like you bake in really critical controls, like the climate controls into the touchscreen, it's extra keystrokes, right? So instead of being like, all right, here we go, I just want to turn a dial, it's press the temperature, raise or lower it, close the temperature so I can access the rest of the screen. What they've added is before it was just a finger slider and you could go way off with that. They kind of jitterbugged it a little bit where they added two large like icons for plus and minus. So like that, they're not going to go back from the screen, but being smart about, how that's being implemented and executed, I think is really important. That's the only area of like critique I had an otherwise like beautiful car. Like they've kind of added to the Mercedes EQ styling. So it's got like the black grille with a black bezel. But
so the E450 is ICE, right? That's
it is. It is. So it's mild hybrid, turbocharged inline six. I think it's got like 360 horsepower or something like that. It might be more. But it can move insanely smooth. I mean, Mercedes still, regardless of what I think of the infotainment system, they still set the bar for interiors. If you're not Bentley and you're not Rolls-Royce, like Mercedes sedan interiors are the gold standard in the industry, especially the E-Class and the S-Class. And I mean, it's when you think about a mid-size luxury sedan and you're not thinking about like performance oriented the way that like a 5 Series is, just comfort oriented, it's the definitive mid-size luxury car.
Yeah. So I just swapped into the Volvo XC60. So I haven't had
I
enough
just had
time
that.
to. It's that blackout one really looks cool. Like everything's black on it. Really looks nice.
Yeah.
But I haven't driven it enough to kind of form an opinion yet. But last week I was in the Nissan Araya, and it's been a long time since I've really liked the Nissan. That flat out, like they have not built my favorite car in a long time. That one and the Z both have kind of turned around for me. I have you guys driven the Araya?
Yeah, I think I must be right before you in the rotation because I had that over Labor Day weekend, and then I just got out of the XC60 Recharge, which I really liked.
Really, yeah. So the Araya, like, I really liked the way that they utilized that the space inside it as much as possible, right? So the console kind of moves back and forth. You can kind of push it out of the way. There's a tray that slides out from under the dash. And so the space between the driver and the passenger is all open. So you can put stuff down there. It just feels much more spacious. It's like we're in this time when you don't need a transmission tunnel. So why do we have fake transmission tunnels and everything? It's like, why are we still separated from the passenger?
Yeah, I think they put a lot of effort into that because it was their first EV since the Bolt. They said, look, this is everything we've learned since then. This is sort of our vision for EVs going forward. And this is going to sort of anchor what our ideas are for other EVs. And so in that in mind, definitely it punches above its weight. I'm trying to think like what model I had. If the range was adequate, but like that'll get there.
It was huge. Yeah. It was almost 300 miles. I drove it up to Maine, had tons of range left, charged it fully. I mean, I went for a run, so it was fully charged in 45 minutes, but I just went from 20 to 85% in the time it took me to walk into Target, pick up a couple of things, use the bathroom, and head back out again. And, so like 25 minutes or so to go, from 10 to 80% is pretty, or I guess it was 20 to 80%. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So, I was pretty impressed with it. Well,
I took it to Vermont with no issues. So,
did you really? So how is the charger network up there?
It's all like level 2 so it was, slower, but it was still fine for getting between Boston and, Wilmington, Berkshires, North Adams, like no problem.
We used the chargers at Mount Snow the last time I was up there, and this is a level 2 charger, but it worked great.
So that's one of the things with like people, like areas that were early on to electric charging. So you got like Boston area, like I'm right by Brown in like Eastside Providence, and then in Vermont, those are places that were kind of early on. And at the time, the only thing they had was level 2. And so right now you have this thing where like there's a lot of chargers in Boston, but they're all level 2. They haven't really cycled in these higher output chargers. In Rhode Island, I have a ton. So level 2 and level 3. So that's been really good.
Well, Natalie, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It's always a pleasure, and you're doing great work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was really fun. And always sort of nurturing experience to get to talk about careers with other folks in the same boat and other NEMPA folks.
For sure. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time around.